They told us humans were fragile. That they broke easily. That they bled fast and died faster. But what if everything you've heard was a lie? What if the most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the strongest, but the one who survives when it shouldn't? The one who remembers when others forget? The one who turns myths into strategy and history into prophecy? Tonight, we uncover what they tried to bury. Not just the truth, but a truth so powerful, it could shatter empires. Watch closely. And ask yourself, what if humanity was never meant to win the war, but to outlive it? A cold silence echoed down the endless corridors of the warship Unyielding Fist. The floor beneath was a dull, brushed metal, pockmarked with the wear of countless boots and clawed feet. Overhead, faint pulses of blue emergency light washed across the arched ceiling in intervals, like a heartbeat buried beneath armor. The only sound that accompanied the 10 Torven soldiers was the rhythmic click-click-click of claw tips meeting steel, and the low, whispering drag of muscular tails sweeping behind them. At the front marched General Vexar, the living war monument of the Torven Empire. His body bore the hardened testament of over 100 battles, scales scorched black, his left eye filmed over with the ghostly hue of blindness, and segments of his tail replaced with gleaming alloy implants. He stopped before a sealed door embedded with his personal crest, a slashing fong over a spiral of fire. Without a word, he pressed a scaled palm to the bioscanner. The door hissed and folded open with the sound of escaping breath. Inside, the temperature dropped even further. "Enter," he growled. The soldiers obeyed, filing into a room that was wide yet strangely hollow. A strange stillness clung to the air, as if the walls themselves remembered screams that had long faded. The chamber's illumination was dim, lit only by a series of glowing energy filaments along the ceiling. No furniture, no banners, no comfort. Only trophies of war lined the walls, savage relics from fallen species. A shattered exoskeleton of a Jaxari warlord. A ceremonial blade from the hive mines of Varnak. The petrified bones of a Mistdweller gas form, suspended in a containment field. But of all these displays, not a single item came from a human. Krell, the most senior of the squad, tilted his head and narrowed his pale yellow eyes. His jaw clicked once, a Torven gesture of confusion. "Strange," he muttered, almost to himself. "No human trophies." The general said nothing. "Sit," he ordered. The 10 soldiers dropped into a disciplined circle on the floor, their tails curling instinctively behind them. Vexar approached the far wall and pressed his claw to a sunken panel. A soft chime followed. Then a low hum vibrated through the room, as a holographic projector activated in the center. A spherical interface flickered to life, casting airy blue light across their armored faces. The general entered a security code, one that only high-ranking field commanders possessed. "What I am about to show you," he began, his voice slow and grave, "is classified at the highest level. High Command forbids us to speak of it. But silence breeds ignorance. And ignorance," he paused, his blind eye glinting like frost. "Ignorance gets soldiers killed." The hologram sharpened, forming the image of a much younger Vexar, bright-scaled, both eyes clear and full of fury. "This was 30 years ago," Vexar said. "I was a lieutenant. My first deployment. Our target, a small human mining colony on asteroid LV-426. The soldiers remained still. Their scaled jaws tight. They had all heard of LV-426. A dead rock. A training myth. We believed humans were inferior, Vexar continued. Soft flesh. Weak bone. Creatures that bled easily and broke even faster. We were ordered to observe, not engage. Watch their routines. Learn their weaknesses. The projection shifted to rocky terrain, jagged cliffs and ash-colored dust. Small, blocky structures huddled together like prey under storm clouds. The image trembled. Then boom, a blast of fire and falling stone. The mine collapsed, the screen filled with swirling debris and darkness. My squad 5 Torven was buried alive, with 12 human miners. Vexar's voice lowered, distant now. We expected fear. Madness. The humans had no weapons. Most were wounded. Some bleeding out. But what we saw? The image refocused. Humans were moving among the wreckage. Lifting debris. Sharing oxygen tanks. Binding Torven wounds alongside their own. A woman stood at the center, small, dirt-streaked, and unarmed. Her voice was calm. Her orders sharp. She was called Sarah Chen, Vexar said. A mining engineer. Not a soldier. Not a warrior. And yet, she took command. The soldiers stared in stunned silence. One image showed her lifting a beam that should have crushed her. Another showed her tearing fabric from her own shirt to treat a Torven wound. They worked without rest, Vexar whispered. For 3 days. No sleep. No food. Just willpower. The image froze on Sarah's face, bruised, exhausted, but utterly focused. The expression of someone who had already died and decided it wasn't time yet. She saved me, he said. I had a neck wound. Arterial. No Torven medicine on site. She gave me her own blood. Not a word passed among the soldiers. Their laughter earlier, the jokes, the myths, they now felt like a child's bedtime lies. Now, Vexar turned to them, voice like stone. You still find human stories amusing? His claw hovered over the panel. Then prepare yourselves, to see what we were never meant to know. The hologram pulsed softly, its glow flickering like an ember in the darkened chamber. Blue light played across the chiseled faces of the soldiers, reflecting in their black pupils like ghost fire. General Vexar didn't speak right away. He stood still, watching the frozen image of the collapsed mine on asteroid LV-426, a place long erased from Torven records. Then the hologram moved. Stone dust drifted like fog through the broken tunnels. Jagged beams jutted downward like the teeth of some metal beast, half buried in rubble and blood. Bodies moved slowly, struggling, limping. But none of them stopped. The humans were working. Shirts torn. Faces smeared with soot. Limbs wrapped in torn belts. They crawled through the wreckage, dragging out the wounded. Some couldn't walk. Others were burned. Still, no one surrendered to the darkness. General Vexar's voice broke the silence, low and weighted like a distant avalanche. For 3 days, he said, we were buried under that tomb of stone and steel. No escape. No command. No rescue. Just us. And the humans. One image froze Sarah Chen. Barely 5 feet tall. Her hands were blackened, fingernails cracked and bloody. And yet, there she was, lifting a support beam 3 times her weight, her face twisted in pain, but her eyes clear and locked on her goal. She never stopped, Vexar continued. She refused sleep. Refused rest. Directed the injured. Sacrificed for strangers, even for us. He raised a clawed finger to the long scar that carved its way across his thick neck. This wound, he said, should have ended my life. He paused. The soldiers stared at the deep line, one they had seen before but never questioned. I lost too much blood. Our medkits were destroyed. My vision blurred. My pulse faded. His voice grew quiet. She gave me her blood. The word hung in the air like a curse. A transfusion, she called it. Even Drex, the youngest among them, felt his breath catch in his throat. But, General, Drex began carefully, could your memory be compromised? Perhaps the injury. I asked myself the same, Vexar interrupted, his voice hardening. That's why I searched. I dug through battle archives, medical reports, interrogation files, survivor logs. He turned back to the control panel and pressed another code. The hologram flared white, then shifted again. Now the images were darker. Grittier. Real battle footage, not propaganda. A battlefield torn by fire and ash. Plasma bolts screeched through the air. Torven soldiers advanced in formation, unstoppable, invincible. But there, in the midst of the chaos, stood a single human. His armor was torn. Blood soaked through his side. He had been hit once, twice, 5 times, and yet he did not fall. He stood firm in the doorway of a shattered building, holding a primitive ballistic rifle. Behind him, civilians wounded and terrified scrambled to safety. "He should have been dead," Vexar whispered. "Our weapons are designed to liquefy tissue." But he stood. Because they needed him to. The screen changed again. A medical scan. An anatomical model of the human body. Labels in Torven script pointed to overlapping systems, redundant pathways, capillary rerouting, adrenal surges beyond expected thresholds. "Humans," Vexar said, "have backup systems." He pointed to the glowing organs. "Their bodies react under pressure faster than ours. Blood reroutes. Bones absorb trauma. They keep moving, even when they shouldn't." Another file loaded. A human prisoner shackled with restraint cuffs designed for the Crocker, a species 10 times stronger than baseline Torven. The footage was grainy. A guard barked something. Then, without warning, the prisoner's eyes flared with rage. His muscles surged. And the restraints' reinforced alloy snapped like brittle wire. "They can exceed their limits," Vexar said, voice low. "Under pain. Under fear. Or when someone they care for is threatened." Silence. Vaughn, the female soldier, folded her arms. Her tail twitched. "But if they're this powerful, why haven't they won?" she asked. "Why are we still pushing them back?" Vexar turned slowly. His good eye narrowed. "Because we struck first," he answered. "We came with numbers. With orbitals. With surprise. But every battle has grown harder. Every system we take costs more." He looked around the room at their scaled faces, their scars, their confusion. "You think we are winning," he said softly, "because that's what High Command wants you to believe." The hologram dimmed. "High Command feeds you stories," he said. "Lies. They want you to laugh at humans. They want you to believe they are weak. Predictable. Fragile." He stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "Because they are afraid," he whispered, "of what happens when humans stop defending and start fighting back." No one spoke. No one laughed. The myths were gone. Only the truth remained. The holographic projector cast a pale shimmer over the war room, distorting the air like heat rising from scorched earth. General Vexar's claw moved slowly across the control panel, and the air thickened with tension as a new image came into view, the Moon Titan, cold and silent, orbiting the gas giant Saturn like a watchful eye. "This," Vexar said, his voice hollow, "is New Anchorage." The soldiers straightened, some with pride, others with a hint of unease. New Anchorage had become a symbol. A shining example of Torven dominance. A battle taught in military academies. A clean victory. Fast. Efficient. "Official records say we took the colony in 8 days, the general continued. "Only 200 Torven casualties. Thousands of humans lost. A decisive triumph." He paused, letting the weight of those words hang in the air like smoke. "Now," he said, tapping another code, "you will see what really happened." The hologram shifted, now taken from the helmet cam of a Torven frontline soldier. The feed was shaky, blurred at the edges, and tinted with the red haze of combat sensors. "Day 1, Vexar murmured. The footage showed 5,000 Torven soldiers advancing in perfect formation, black armor gleaming under the pale Titan sun, weapons charged and ready. The terrain was deceptively simple, low buildings, clustered together, surrounded by jagged frost-covered ridges and abandoned mining gear. "Only 1,200 humans defended this settlement," Vexar said. "A simple sweep. That was the plan. Then, chaos. Without warning, the ground exploded. Hidden charges turned soil and snow into a maelstrom of shrapnel and flame. Torven troops were thrown like dolls into the air. The front line crumbled. From windows and rooftops, snipers struck. Their bullets were not plasma, but chemically propelled steel, crude, but terrifyingly precise. Officers fell first. Coordination vanished. 800 Torven died in the first hour. The soldiers in the chamber stared, unblinking, as their brethren screamed and vanished in fire. These humans were not soldiers, Vexar said. They were engineers, medics, teachers. They wielded mining lasers, pressurized drills, kitchen knives. The hologram displayed the humans' makeshift defenses. They had vented steam into the air, a white fog that blinded Torven infrared. They laid traps using pressurized oxygen tanks, electrical cables, even kitchen pots filled with chemical mixtures that ignited upon contact with Torven blood. They used their environment like a weapon, Vexar said. And they adapted, fast. Another clip began. Day 4. Torven troops had pushed into the settlement's core. Buildings burned. Snow had melted into toxic slush. In one corner, a human was captured, older, gray-haired, wearing a simple lab coat. This is the botanist, Vexar said. He studied native flora for food production. Not a warrior. Not a threat. But when they searched his lab, they found something else. Glass vials. Green liquid. Sealed storage units. He had created a toxin, Vexar explained, derived from Titan's plants. One that penetrated our scale armor at its thinnest points. Vaughn's voice was quiet, almost reverent. But, how did he understand our biology? Vexar didn't flinch. He learned. He studied corpses. Analyzed blood. Isolated compounds. In less than a week, a civilian scientist discovered vulnerabilities our own xenobiologists didn't know existed. The chamber was still. By day 8, the Torven were losing ground. The humans had deciphered their attack patterns. They struck at shift changes, during rest cycles, targeting communication relays and sensory posts. They were dissecting our doctrine, Vexar said, like we were insects on their tables. The general paused, then stepped back. High Command realized they couldn't win on the ground. Another code. The final clip began. From orbit, the Torven command ship opened its launch bay. Inside were metal rods the size of towers. No explosives. Just mass and gravity. Pure kinetic force. The rods fell like thunder from the heavens. From space, they appeared graceful glints of silver arcing through Titan's thin atmosphere. Then, the feed broke into devastation. The colony was obliterated. Concrete turned to vapor. Craters bloomed where homes had stood. Fires swallowed oxygen. Shockwaves tore through Torven and human bodies alike. We didn't win, Vexar said. We erased them. He let the last word settle like ash. The soldiers looked at the footage, now looping silently. Some turned away. Others clenched their jaws. Krell stared at the ground. But our own troops were still there, he said, voice barely audible. Vexar nodded. High Command called them acceptable losses. He deactivated the hologram. All of this, buried under medals and parades. No one celebrated anymore. The truth had silenced them. The air in General Vexar's quarters had grown colder. Not from temperature, but from revelation. One by one, Vexar summoned new files from the holographic console. Each projection cast ghost blue patterns across the metal floor, shadows dancing across the soldiers' armored faces. First came weapons. A timeline formed linear at first, but then fractal, chaotic, exponential. This, Vexar began, was the first rifle humans used against us. The image displayed a primitive design, metallic casing, combustion-based propulsion, chemical projectiles. By Torven standards, crude, inefficient. A toy. But 6 months later, a new rifle appeared. Sleeker. Denser. The projectile tips now glowed red, chemically treated to melt through Torven armor at its weakest points. They studied our fallen, Vexar said. And they learned. A third rifle appeared. Then a fourth. Each more efficient. Each tailored to expose flaws in Torven physiology. The evolution of technology that should have taken decades, compressed into weeks. Humans don't iterate slowly, Vexar murmured. They evolve like wildfire. The display shifted. Now it showed armor. Early suits, like polymers, ineffective against sonic bursts and plasma. But the later models were different. Layered plating with vibration dampeners. Smart reactive gels that thickened under impact. Radiation shielding woven directly into the fabric. These upgrades, Vexar said, were not born from theory. They were born from necessity. And blood. He pointed toward the internal schematics. Every field failure became their next innovation. Every death became a blueprint. Then came medical science. The next file opened MRI scans, genetic charts, accelerated tissue regeneration. After just 1 year of conflict, Vexar said, human field medics began administering serums that increase clotting speed, reduce inflammation, and enhance cellular repair. He zoomed into a tissue sample. The regeneration rate was abnormal, unnaturally fast. Some humans now survive wounds that would kill even us. The room remained silent, save for the soft, pulsing hum of the projector. But Vexar was not done. The next projection was a map glowing starfields scattered with pulsing red and blue symbols. Torven victories were marked in crimson. Human withdrawals, in blue. At first glance, it looked like chaos, fragmented. Uncoordinated. But then... They're not fleeing, Vexar said, eyes narrowing. With a swipe of his claw, he highlighted the movement of human fleets. Each retreat traced a curve always away from Torven strongholds, but never randomly. They're falling back, he said slowly, towards something. The soldiers leaned in. What appeared to be disorder is deliberate repositioning. The red and blue patterns began to shift, aligning like puzzle pieces, forming narrow corridors, tactical positions. They were planning, preparing, and leading them all. Admiral Sarah Chen. Her face appeared next, aged but resolute. Her dark eyes shimmered with something both analytical and deeply human. This is the woman who lifted a steel beam with broken ribs to save a stranger, Vexar said. Now she commands the entirety of their deep space fleet. The room seemed to shrink under her stare. She has gathered knowledge from Earth's past, forgotten doctrines, lost battles, ancient wisdom. He summoned a translation file intercepted from human communications. It mentioned a term. The Thermopylae Protocol. The projector reconfigured. A new scene appeared, not from space, but from Earth's ancient history. Grainy footage reconstructed from human archives. Mountains. A narrow pass. A tiny force holding against thousands. A battle fought over 2,000 years ago, Vexar said. 300 warriors held off a vastly superior army, using terrain, bottlenecks, and unshakable resolve. Drex blinked slowly. But, how could such old stories matter now? Vexar turned to him. Because they remember. He raised a claw and pointed at the myths they had once laughed at. Every tale you mocked was never fiction. They are echoes. Memories. Lessons passed down in blood and ink. He summoned battle records, hundreds of them, comparing tactics used in ancient human wars with current field reports. The similarities were uncanny. Flanking maneuvers from the Battle of Kenny. Guerrilla ambushes resembling those of Vietnam. Sacrificial delays like those at Stalingrad. They learned from every enemy, Vexar said. Even from themselves. He moved to the final file, a decrypted message from Chen to her fleet. Only one phrase was fully translated. The pattern is the weapon. Vexar stepped back. We believe she is drawing the Torven fleet into position. Not to escape, but to encircle. The projector dimmed. The light faded. But the fear remained. Vexar's voice dropped to a whisper. The myths we laughed at are history. The warship Unyielding Fist drifted silently toward the asteroid field like a black leviathan gliding through deep waters. The stars outside were motionless, frozen sparks suspended in the cold vacuum. But something in that stillness was wrong. The field ahead pulsed with silent menace. Dozens, hundreds of jagged rocks spun slowly in space, their paths strangely aligned, their spacing uncannily symmetrical. "Look at the asteroids," General Vexar muttered. His soldiers leaned toward the reinforced observation window, their breath slow, their instincts restless. At first glance, the scene appeared natural, just another debris cluster, left over from planetary formation or ancient collisions. But then, the realization came like ice down the spine. "These aren't random," Krell said under his breath. "No," Vexar replied. "They're ships." The room seemed to lose all air. Camouflaged perfectly, cloaked in shape and signal, the asteroids were no mere space rocks. Beneath their textured shells were the silent hulls of human warships, hundreds of them, powered down, waiting like hunters beneath a frozen lake. An ambush. "They lured us here," Vexar said, his voice now flat with rage. Admiral Chen baited the trap. And High Command ignored every warning. Then the nightmare bloomed. The cloaked ships came alive, their outer shells fragmenting and falling away like dead bark. Engines flared with blue plasma. Turrets spun with terrifying coordination. Hundreds of warships surged into movement, no longer pretending to be part of the void. Alarms blared aboard the unyielding fist. Red lights flashed like blood against steel. Klaxons wailed through the hallways. The ship shuddered, struck by invisible force, its shields reacting too late to the first barrage. The battle had begun. And they were already surrounded. "There is no defense," Vexar said coldly. "No strategy. This isn't a battle, it's an execution." The general didn't hesitate. He turned and strode toward the lower decks. "Follow me." The squad ran after him through shaking corridors, past crew scrambling like ants in a storm. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Pressure doors sealed behind them with a hiss of finality. They reached the shuttle bay. One craft stood apart, smaller, sleeker, wrapped in black shielding alloy, Vexar's personal vessel. "You must survive," he said to them, voice like stone. "You must carry the truth." "But Sir," Drex began, eyes wide. "The fleet." "The fleet is already lost," Vexar growled. "But the story must live." They boarded in silence. The bay trembled as the unyielding fist took another direct hit. One bulkhead caved in, spilling atmosphere and debris into the abyss beyond. The shuttle launched, spinning free from the doomed warship. They rose above the battlefield just in time to witness the end. Below, their mighty vessel, the pride of the Torven fleet, was torn apart. Fire bloomed in silence. Metal twisted like paper. Sections of the ship buckled, collapsed, and vanished into a cloud of wreckage. The last of its lights flickered out. A grave. A warning. Vexar stared out the viewport, his expression unreadable. "In all our history," he said quietly, "we have only retreated from one enemy." He paused. "The Kravok." The name silenced the room. Every soldier knew the legend, an ancient species the Torven Empire had once fought in a war so devastating that entire planetary systems were left barren. A race that adapted, evolved, and never surrendered. They were fast, Vexar said. They were fierce. They were impossible to break. He turned. "Some believe the humans are their descendants. That what we destroyed has returned in another form." 3 weeks passed in cold silence as the shuttle moved through deep space, avoiding patrol routes, cutting through uncharted systems. The crew spoke little. They didn't need to. Each carried the same weight, not fear, but awe. Then the Torven home fleet intercepted them. A towering cruiser, Eternal Victory, blocked their path. Its voice crackled over comms. "General Vexar. You are ordered to surrender. You are charged with desertion and dissemination of enemy propaganda." The soldiers looked at each other. But Vexar remained still. "I expected this," he said. He had already sent messages, coded transmissions to loyal officers across the fleet. Veterans. Survivors. Witnesses. The truth about humanity, he told his soldiers, is our only chance at survival. When they docked, armed guards stood waiting. Commander Drez glared at them with contempt. Your lies won't save you, General, Drez spat. But Vexar stepped forward without hesitation. We are not here to lie, he said. We are here to testify. As they were taken into custody, the soldiers stood tall. They weren't traitors. They were witnesses. And what they carried wasn't just data. It wasn't merely intelligence. It was a new beginning. A warning. A final hope. Because humanity's greatest power is not just their strength. Not just their weapons. Not even their will to survive. It's what they fight for. And that makes them unstoppable. So now you know what they never wanted you to see. Not just strength. Not just defiance. But something deeper. The unexplainable force that drives humans to stand when all others fall. The kind of power that rewrites the rules of war. That turns fear into fuel, and survival into legend. But what do you believe? Are humans truly the descendants of something ancient and unstoppable? Was General Vexar right, or just afraid? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Your voice might be the one that uncovers the next hidden truth. And if this story left you with more questions than answers, good. Because the next chapter has already begun.